Hi folks, welcome to your MWIS Friday Planner in association with Ellis Brigham. Now, quiet conditions will take us into the start of March as high pressure is on the scene for a little while, dry weather prevailing then through the week ahead. Some complications from day to day in terms of some fog banks and some low cloud at times. Some inversion conditions will be in place, with many of the higher summits often in the clear and a good amount of sunshine around. Temperatures on the mild side, nothing particularly excessive, typically a degree or so above freezing on most highest summits, and there will be some frost overnight. Not a huge amount to see on the synoptic charts in the days ahead. We'll try and pick out a few subtle details though. This is Saturday's situation. The centre of the high pressure is across central southern England and Wales. A general southwesterly drift coming around to the north of that, the strongest of any breeze towards the northern side of the Highlands, the lightest of the winds across Wales and the South Pennines. Now, we've got the remnants of a weak front that's just draped in across the north of England, the south of Scotland, at least early in the day. Now, a few spits and spots of rain just left over from overnight could just be around across west and southwest Scotland, and the legacy of some low cloud, which could be rather stubborn around some Irish Sea locations, even the southwest of the Highlands, but here I suspect things will tend to break up. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at the cloud situation, which is what this chart with its disco colours is trying to show. The red colours are where we're looking at the very lowest level cloud, which some of that could even be fog down into the valleys and the glens, but I suspect it's also cloud across the hills as we start Saturday morning. Just notice across the sort of north-northeast side of the Lake District, a bit of a hole in the cloud, which is just likely to be where that south-southwesterly wind is pulling cloud banks into the South Lakes, areas around the Western Yorkshire Dales. Meanwhile, a little bit further north, you're just in the shelter of that first thing in the morning, and we've got a few varied cloud or fog banks across Wales and something a bit more extensive across southwest Scotland. The remnants of the front then trailing somewhere through here at this stage. Let's just take things on through the daytime and just see how things evolve. And this model may overdo things a little bit in terms of the extent of cloud, but it's a reasonable fit for what we're trying to work out in the cloud story of the day. Things tending to lift and break across the Highlands, eastern regions largely in the clear all the way through. But we're still stuck with some of these cloud banks around Dumfries and Galloway and the Lake District, and some across Wales as well, a little bit more broken up across Wales it looks like. Now I think areas around the Western Fells and the Lake District could just be rather stubborn with some of these cloud banks across the hills, breaking further eastwards that you go. Now it may not be the same all the way through the day. It may well be that some breaks do develop in what's left of the footprint of moisture of this old front. Basically, it may not be filled in all the way through, but just be prepared to be maybe a bit disappointed in places if you are heading locally onto some of the fells, especially out toward the west and the south of the Lake District, where these cloud banks and these fog banks may just be in place. Further towards the Pennines, and especially further eastwards, likely to be largely in the clear, the Peak District as well, and much of East and Mid Wales. That's where we get to by the end of the afternoon. Still the suggestion then that some of those cloud and fog banks could just be plaguing areas of the Lake District. I'll just take the story on into the overnight period through into Sunday. Now this may be picking out more in terms of the low-level fog that forms across the Midlands, central northern England, across into East Wales as well. A bit of an easterly drift just developing at this stage, also trying to find low cloud and fog all the way across the North Sea. So at low levels at least, could be a rather murky start to Sunday morning. Some of that may be some banks of cloud on the hills, but with an inversion in place, it may well be that most of the hills are above that, and it all begins to break up through the daytime. Western Scotland, maybe just dragging in the west by southwesterly flow off the Atlantic, maybe just pulling some low cloud banks in off the sea, so western coastal mountains here may just struggle through Sunday. So as I said, just those subtle details in the forecast that produced a few little complications going onwards. There's Sunday's chart, not much to see for it. High pressure is in charge, very little wind for most places, maybe just that strengthening easterly across the hills of South Wales, and we've got that general southwesterly drift across the north of the Highlands. It's a dry day overall, it's just a question of some of those low-level fog banks. Now, I know some of you like looking at the vertical profiles. Just as an example, that's the situation we expect on Sunday morning, just across northern England by example. It will be similar in many places, it must be said, and that's the inversion setup. We've got the most saturated conditions, the temperature and the dew point shown on the red and the blue lines, And where they're close together right at the bottom of this chart just indicates that scope for very low level fog. As those two lines separate slightly higher up, you're getting to the level of the hills. Well, the separation means that the air is drier and the greater likelihood of being above any fog lower down. And where the greatest separation is occurring onto the higher hills, well, you have a very good chance of being above an inversion. There is then just that slight lift of temperature with height. Some of the coolest air is at the very lowest levels. Temperatures on the hills typically just a few degrees higher first thing in the morning. It may just be that situation mid-morning, some of those lowest level fog banks for a time just lift onto some of the hill slopes, but even then I think the very highest tops would be in the clear. So there's always something going on with the weather, even when there isn't much happening, so always just want to keep an eye on what's happening locally. Monday then, high pressure is just to the east of us, the drift coming in from the south to southeast, maybe more of an easterly wind across Wales, which will be quite blustery and gusty in places through some of the passes and around exposed ridges. Similar maybe on some of the edges in the Peak District. Now that may just drag in some low-level fog and cloud banks off the North Sea. The extent of that is uncertain, a little bit hazy across England and Wales. Very clear conditions though across northern Britain. Again, some very low-level fog patches, but overall the hills and the mountains should be in the clear across Scotland and much of northwest England through Monday. A slack southeasterly pattern into Tuesday keeps things dry, may just be again some low-level fog and a few cloud banks just lurking around in places, but otherwise it's a quiet day. Winds staying light, one or two passes and a few corries may just be a little bit gusty at times, and around the west coast of Scotland maybe just a bit stronger. Now just a few subtle complications out to the south and southwest where there's a trough just around Biscay. That's just producing a few areas of showers there, and that may just get drawn into the mix in the middle of the week. Some uncertainty though on just how that behaves. So for now, the idea of high pressure more or less being on the scene, the remnants of a front somewhere toward northwest Scotland, the remnants of a trough somewhere possibly even drifting off towards the Low Countries. It's hard to get the absolute detail at this stage. Mostly dry then, chance just locally of a spot of rain and a few cloud banks. Otherwise it should be a fair picture. Looking at things towards the end of the week, and we see high pressure is still nearby. Now we may even see the high sort of recenter itself out toward the north of Britain by Thursday into Friday. All in all, it keeps settled conditions on the cards for us. Possibly just starting to watch a colder push of air being dragged into Scandinavia. Now that might further ahead get some chillier conditions further into the heart of Europe, and if it does, that may have a knock-on effect for the weather that we see further onwards. But most indications as we get a week down the line from now still see high pressure nearby, maybe with an easterly drift of wind across England and Wales, little wind across Scotland it looks like, and dry conditions still prevailing. The forecast modelling for the week as a whole through until the 11th of March still sees high pressure on the scene, so this idea of a settled spell through the early part of March is very likely, and then we're just watching to see how that breaks down, if it does, in the middle of the month, or whether we just hang on to quiet, benign springtime conditions for the foreseeable future. We'll keep you up to date with all those developments. That's been your Friday Planner in association with Ellis Brigham. Enjoy some fine weather locally if you can. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.